All right. Hi everyone. Thank you for taking an hour today to attend the last the last scheduled governing board call of the year. Um, Main thing I wanted to focus on today, and I sent out an agenda this morning. I know I actually got a reply from a couple of you on that. So um, the main thing I wanted to focus on today was governance and you know, brainstorming within the TSC. Sorry, I'm just putting my phone on vibrate because it's making noises. Brainstorming on the technical steering committee of the OCA and governance around the projects. Um, I do think this is, so this has been a long-standing, back-burning item for us, and we tried to address it back in August with putting out open calls for nominations for the technical steering committee that would run all through September. And unfortunately, we never really got any responses to that call. Um, oh, Duncan's here. And you know, as a result, we're in a bit of a limbo state on the technical governance side of the OCA, where according to Oasis OP rules, we have to have a technical steering committee. But as of right now, we don't. We have a number of projects going on. They are being well maintained. They have maintainers. So no immediate concerns there. But the challenge is because we don't actually have a proper TSC, there's two main problems. First, we're actually in violation of the rules, and we have to remediate that. Second, it's just good governance of an open organization with open governance. That there is a technical steering committee that can enact decisions in a neutral way, right? So that any one organization isn't controlling the destiny of various projects. And then third, within the TSC, we're having a hard time making forward progress on a couple of outstanding items, simple things like when third parties in the community come in with pull requests for our code, what do we do? What is our consistent policy that we as an organization are trying to do across those projects? Because right now we kind of just leave it into the hands of the maintainers, and they kind of make decisions, and the reality is it's actually under control of the organizations that the maintainers are working for, right? And that works to a certain extent, but again, going back to the principles of open governance in this organization, we really want to have the ability to have checks and balances around that. And I think this is really important, especially as we look to bring on projects like PACE. We've got PACE coming in. um Fantastic project. We're about to do the press release for that, hoping to get more parties involved contributing to that. Having a technical governance structure in place, I think, is really important. um so anyway, I wanted to feel that, and I see Duncan's here now. Hi, Duncan. um I just wanted to spend a good solid amount of time here brainstorming around this idea and what we should do, because like I say, we tried to do as much as possible, ran an open call for volunteers slash nominations. We put that out to our whole mailing list. We put it out to our internal community. Hopefully the organizations involved circulated internally as well. But we never really got anyone come forward, including from any of our members who aren't already involved in the projects, right? And that's what we were trying to do. We were really trying to get some involvement from outside of the current maintainers. That was my hope anyway. Um, and so Duncan had an interesting proposal that he outlined more in email there around, should we at least start from the maintainers? Should we look to form a technical steering committee at least out of that, so that we have an organization to get started with? And I think that's probably something we should talk about as well. Um, so Duncan, did you want to chime in before we start the brainstorming, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we have a governance, mainly for the point Jason made of we want other people to contribute. And I think other people are not contributing because they have a perception that actually isn't true of the organization, that it is just basically a company thing. And we are going out of our way to not be that way, but we're not really showing that. If you just go to our website, you look at our governance, it, it doesn't really get to how we, for example, I actually don't remember. How do we pick our maintainers? The maintainers for each project. Do we vote on them as a PGP and only PGP members can do it, which only people who paid the money, or can anyone be a member? Stuff like that you can't find on the website, and I actually don't even remember how we did them. So we if we want to be more open to more people joining, which I think we're at an opportunity when we get the other agenda item, that we're at sort of a cusp. We could get a really lot of people really interested, I think, soon. Or we could turn a lot of people off and they're going to go do it somewhere else. And I think we have to sort of pick which we're going to do. But if you look at us compared to other groups like us, which all said and done, we are competing with. I mean, I know people don't like to think it's competition, but it really is. Um, we need to look at how they do things, and all said and done, they're way better than us in these areas. Over.
Yeah, I'd agree 100% with everything you said. Um, I think to answer your the first question, Duncan, the official way, the official way as per the governance that um, maintainers are chosen is by the technical steering committee, and the technical steering committee is chosen by the governing board. That's that's the official way. Um, but I
So,
mean, then
so
we
we,
get back
so
to
what you're
this.
saying is we don't have any maintainers yet.
No, well, this is where we get back to the chicken and the egg, right? So the reality is right now we have maintainers, but we don't have a TSC, um, which is strange. It's strange but true. I don't know. um, and we need to try to figure out how to. So I think there's two things, right? We need to figure out, tactically how to remedy that, um, especially with pace coming on, right? Adam, like I assume that there are folks who plan to be maintainers of that project or already are. I think Dave Lemire is, right?
That's
So,
correct.
yeah, so I mean, I think Duncan's suggestion of, there should at least be one TSC member from each of the core projects, right? Like it makes
And
perfect
preferably two,
sense.
I would say. I mean, ideally it'd be two from each, because so we're not single threaded.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I mean, we could say two from each. As we start, as we, we've got. You mean two? Yeah, that's fine. As the number of projects grow, maybe we need to look at that, but that would be a good problem to have. But
What?
I mean, the question I have is, um, I mean, we could go away after this call and just kind of make that happen, right? Is that what we want to do? Like we could go away after this call and I could go to the maintainers of Stick Shifter, maintainers of Kestrel, and we could say, okay, you know, you guys need to volunteer to be part of this board. And, Adam can take a similar approach with Pace. And we could make that happen. But is that the approach or, you
Ideally,
know,
there'd be, in addition, I would call that the minimum TSC. I mean, you got to have, if the TSC's job is to do governance across the projects, you got to have representation from the projects, in my opinion. And so if you're going to be a maintainer, then you got to agree to put at least a little bit of time into attending an occasional TSC meeting, or sending emails, or getting together with the other maintainers and deciding either to do things similarly or to consciously decide to do things differently. Different projects can be different on purpose, but it should be a conscious decision, not just because Duncan did one and Adam did another. It should be, we're trying to make OCA a coherent whole, so there should be some mechanism for cross-project coordination, and the TSC is supposed to be it. So I would say, as a minimum, you got at least one from each project, because we don't have that many projects yet. I would argue two, preferably from two different projects. But ideally, there'd be other people as well that are not from a particular project, that are sort of looking at bigger picture, how's the OCA work. But then we get into issues like, well, do they have to be member companies or not. You guys mentioned Dave Lemire, whether he's wearing his HII hat or his NSA hat, doesn't matter either way. Neither of them are a sponsoring company or organization. So is that allowed? Assuming it's allowed, and we should just make sure
It's definitely allowed. It's definitely, I mean, that's what we want to encourage, right?
but again, that's not, I don't think you can find that written anywhere. So again, where we
it is written
encourage
in the
people to
governance.
help. Okay.
Yeah, and the governance document does make it, I mean, well, it makes it clear that the TSC, it's not tied to the PGB in any way, right? And our previous TSC,
You're right. You're right.
you
The
know,
TSC that is clear on. Is it all? And it's all. Is that clear on maintain? It's also clear on maintainers. So you're right. It's clear on both of them.
yeah,
So that's good. So that won't contradict anything to do that. But it would ideally we'd get a couple people other than that. That we'd have to have a process to select them, in addition to selecting the maintainers. But at least to solve the problem of, hey, we don't have a TSC. Let's just by edict say, hey, if you're going to be a maintainer, you got to be on the TSC, and therefore we now have a TSC.
that's correct.
And I am not a maintainer, but I'll volunteer to be on the TSC as well, which I have done in the past, if you want someone to be overarching. But I won't run it.
So that's a good approach. That just something we should be aware of. So I like the idea of at least one person, one maintainer, or one person from each of the projects be involved with the TSC. I think that's a good idea. The current maintainers didn't sign up for that, so they may not have bandwidth to do that. We should just be aware of it.
But I would argue you shouldn't be allowed to be a maintainer if you don't at least have the bandwidth to be interacting with the TSC on how to be a maintainer, right? The whole issue is doing things across projects.
I understand, but to me, it's kind of like having a maintainer of a project to me is more important than ensuring that there's a TSC for some reason.
I disagree.
The projects need to be having. That's fair. You're allowed to disagree. I disagree too. So it's just kind of like more important for the projects to make progress, right? Like I want each project to make progress, and without a maintainer, they're not going to do that. Well, yes, we want them to be coordinated, but we can only do so much as by edict, right?
Well, true, but if there is any, I mean, if we want to get around the perception that this is just an IBM McAfee project, then we have to deal with that. Okay. And if it is just, all right, we'll just pick the McAfee and IBM guys to be the maintainers, and then we don't have a process by which others could be selected, and they don't have to participate with people from other companies and people from other projects, I don't think we're going to fight that perception. I'll say
I see both sides of this, and what I would suggest what I would suggest, and I think it might help alleviate Adam's concern, is we just need to be crystal clear as to what the expectation is of what is the TSC, right? And how much work are we creating here? Because it's honestly should not be much at all of anything. It's like, it's basically, from an agile perspective, the TSC is the scrum of scrums, right? So you've got these team leaders, they're running, the maintainers are running these projects, and there needs to be some kind of monthly sync where the leaders of those projects meet. That's to me kind of what the TSC needs to be.
Or even just send emails to each other. Ideally, it would make less work for them because they'd say, oh, I don't need to do that. They're doing that. I can steal it from them.
Yeah. I don't know, Adam, if that helps or.
Yeah, I mean, if we can clarify that it's a minimum, or whatever makes sense for what the TSC is supposed to. I can't even remember all the acronyms. What the TSC is supposed to do, right? If we're clear about that, then people have a really good understanding of what they're jumping into or what they're committing to, and I think that's necessary. I think that we want to empower the projects to be as autonomous as they can be while also having some form of governance, right? or at least similarity between the products in terms, or projects rather, in terms of how they're managing themselves. So if you are a project and you have a maintainer and a separate representative to the TSC, I think that's satisfactory. I don't think you have to be both, right?
No, yeah, I'm
you
fine
can
with
let
that.
it
As long as
happen.
there is one,
Right.
as long as there is
Right.
one, I'm okay with it. It doesn't have to be, but if no one else will be it, then
Correct.
that's what falls apart.
That
That's when it's
and
probably going to fall on the maintainers.
right, and I'm totally fine with that. Like I said before, it's just something we need to be aware of, that if there is some maintainer who literally is up against their capacity and they can't do anything else, no matter how minimal, it's an off chance that that'll happen.
Now, so
And I'm hoping.
let me ask a related question. So how often do we re-elect, if that's the right term, maintainers?
Not specified. The wording is that maintainers are appointed by the TSC. So it's not an election. And similarly, the TSC is appointed by the PGB. So it's also not an election, right?
Sorry, may I briefly interject this, Claudia? I was wondering about that, and maybe I know all projects have different, like the people who get engaged have different motivations for that, but we have the baseline project, and the community elects the TSC. And
yeah,
and people were
it's
like,
up to
19 candidates, right? Because it's also, I mean, it's a very different project, very different market and everything. But taking that like out of the equation, I think people are motivated to join because of recognition. So, and because of the work they can get done for their companies, because the TSC actually kind of shapes the product, I guess. Here, it's a bit more like OCA is much larger and like it's very different. But I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I should be more clear. So I mean the OASIS rules leave it open, right, as to how it works, and then we in the OCA have our own governance document that we all agreed upon when the organization was formed, and that document doesn't have in it that they're elected. I mean, we could make them elected. My personal opinion is that would be a little bit counterproductive. I mean, we have a hard enough time doing our own any voting, right? I do not predict that an election would do much, put it that way. I don't think that we would get anyone voting in it, right?
Well, you're assuming again it's the PGB voting. I think the other one she mentioned, or at least some.
Well, I don't think anyone like who would vote in it outside, like.
Well, but that's how, if you look at, for example, some of the Linux Foundation projects, they are self-governed. Their governance rules have rules on how you can vote and some are contributing members only,
Right.
or basically anybody who feels like it. We can do any of them. I'm just saying we.
Yeah, so to be clear, I'm not against this. I think if we were at the point that we could do that, I would be over the moon, right? If we ever got to the point that we had enough different project contributors that they could, go and vote on something, run an election and vote their own leaders, it'd be fantastic. But we're not there yet. This is a chicken and the egg scenario to me. Like
I agree, and the chicken and egg part is not others. Others aren't joining. I would argue others aren't joining because we haven't solved this issue.
Yeah,
it's not obvious how to join and contribute. Like if I had something I wanted in Stick Shifter, would I be allowed to, put a feature in and have a chance of them being accepted? I don't, how does Stick Shifter do its prioritization of features and who accepts and who doesn't accept? You can't. Stick Shifter is probably the best documented one, and you can't find that information. You can't find how to be, hey, if I just want to come help, how do I do it? Other than submit a random pull request in, and some person I don't know will decide whether it's acceptable or not. What say do I have with that other person? That's the type of thing that restricts others from joining, and we want to try and lower that bar somehow. Even if it's we just document how we do it, which is, yeah, no, these guys are the maintainers.
Yeah, I mean, there is a level of that that's documented as far as, so there's a contributing.md that's part of the template, and it's like, do you want to contribute? Great, and it's about a page long.
Right, but it doesn't say how the people who decide whether to accept what you said or not got picked, or what say, can you go to meetings where you can give them input, stuff like that. None of that, I don't think, is in any of those documents. It's just, no, the maintainers, whoever they are, will decide.
I think, Duncan, this is a super important point that you're making. I'm wondering how we could move forward. I would like to assist in reviewing these things to make them more transparent, or I can just go ahead and do it.
I mean, Claudia,
make suggestions.
I'd love that, Claudia.
Okay.
Like if, and I think that we're open to any suggestions, right? If this is like an issue of transparency, if there's a transparency issue, then we can solve that extremely fast, right? So, you know, whatever needs to be written down to make it more clear, let's do that. I was under the impression that we're already like extremely transparent, but if we think that there's more that we can do, then let's do that, and you know, and get that as well as a template for all of the projects. I know that Chet, there's discussion about like or maybe it was Claudia, maybe it was D, I can't remember. Someone was talking about a template so that when new projects get created, that everything kind of gets sucked into it around, you know, how to contribute, all of the different markdown files for the OCA, so that's consistent across them when new projects get created. And yeah, that can all be part of that activity, right?
Right.
For
yeah,
sure.
We're talking about that now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is super valuable to hear this discussion, and any pointers, feedback, criticism, just send it my way. I'm very happy to implement that and kind of, yeah, try to make everything work better.
Would you agree to be on the TSC?
I don't think I can.
Why not?
I'm an Oasis employee, so I don't know.
Well, one,
But I'm happy to help the TSC.
one
sure.
quick point. I was part of the creation of Kantara initiative, and basically we made every chair of every, you know, technical committee was a member of what we called the TSC. And of course, that was at the creation time. We were talking about doing something like that, maybe retrospectively or retroactively, that is. But
well, it's only retroactive because we're still figuring out how to do this.
Right.
It's
yeah.
still pretty new.
I mean, you'd be going back to the current chairs and saying you're now a member of this committee that you didn't know you were going to be a member of. But
which in our case would be the maintainers, right? Is what you're saying, Matthew? The maintainers.
Yeah. Whoever the chair or the primary point person of the official committee. And in fact, another thing we did is the TSC elected a representative to the equivalent of the PGB. I'm not saying we need to do that, but I mean, there was this structure where, you know, subcommittee chairs were the TSC over all the technical committees. They appointed somebody to the governing board. And so if you want to look at how Kantara is set up, that might.
That's also the way it works under the Oasis rules, that the TSC, there's a seat on the PGB for a representative of the TSC, and the TSC decides who that is.
So we probably just copied Oasis at the time then.
Yeah. You know, it also occurs to me that obviously the way that the TSC is formed is under your control. You all decide and, you know, pass a motion and say, here's how it's going to be done, and that becomes part of the governance. It doesn't necessarily mean that the TSC has to immediately set up monthly meetings and, you know, and go do anything. They they may see no need to meet, but what might make it useful would be to say, by the way, when is the TSC's existence important? Oh, you guys want to push something forward for ratification as an official release, or for project specification status or something like that. Oh, you're going to need the TSC in existence when you want to do that. So it may be that part of it is the self-interest of, yeah, as long as I don't have to put a lot of time into it now, it's good to be on this thing, because 6 or 8 months down the road, I may need these guys to come together to approve recommending a package to the PGB for approval. And I want to be there when that happens. So it may be that there's part of it is explaining the value that the TSC is going to have. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but at some point along the road where yep, now we're going to need it. Now you want to be at the table.
Yeah, and I think in the ideal scenario, right? Like the work the TSC needs to do should rapidly decline, right? It's there's once the initial work is done around setting the policies and procedures, then it's kind of like you say, Chet, that they should be able to do almost everything over email, very little meetings required, because the key is to get those things in place, right? About how we're going to do things.
And if in theory we're already doing them, then we should already know how we're doing them. And yeah, maybe we're not doing them coordinated. Maybe everybody's doing it differently, each of the different projects. But at least if each project documented how they were doing it as our initial state, then we just say, yeah, then the TSC looks across them and goes, well, that's sort of stupid. Why don't these two guys get together and do it the same way or whatever? Pick either red or blue, it doesn't matter. Or we say, no, red's good for them and blue's good for them, and we leave it that way. But we should at least be knowing what we're already doing. If we're already doing it, which I think we are, right?
That's right.
I had a question about overall timeline, which is, we're having this conversation. If I was just going back through all the emails, we're having this conversation because we knew in September that the TSC positions were coming back up. And then in the beginning of October, there was no response to the request for nominations. So, I'm trying to think, what is our best case? And also, the open question is what is realistic moving forward. But what is the best case? Like if, let's say that each of us on the call right now could do something as great as what Adam has offered to do, which is put somebody forward when there's bandwidth. So, let's say if the 9 of us could, in a best case, put somebody forward, how many people do we need, and what is the date that what is the quorum to convene? If we found out of all of us on the call 3 people to put forward, is that a good enough quorum? What's the best case scenario, and at what date would that happen?
It's a great question. I think, there's no technical minimum quorum, but like if we went to the existing project maintainers, right, and said, this is what we're doing, it doesn't mean extra time commitment per se, we just need to organizationally structure this so that we can start coordinating. I would think we could do that fairly quickly. And then, yeah, I think, Ladrina, it would be fantastic if we could get some others from outside the projects, as you say, folks who are interested in working in the community, who know a little bit about, open source and release management processes, to help with the governance, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. It's governance. We're not looking for people to do code. We're looking for overseers.
And Jason, to Adam's point earlier, you could add either you're on it or talk someone else into being on it from the project, just so there's at least one person from each project. Doesn't
Right.
have to be the maintainer. I think ideally in my mind it'd be one of the maintainers, but it doesn't have to be if they can get somebody else to be it.
Yeah. And I mean, I can take care of that for the 2 projects that we are primary on. I can do that.
Well, then we have at least 2 people already, and I had already volunteered to be on the TSC, so we have 3. So
Basically,
what other projects are there, and are they established? Because part of the reason all this came up is because PACE is getting established and needs to know, hey, what does it need to provide and who needs to do what?
Right. Do we need, so something that's coming to my mind is basically what I think we want is the TSC to be almost like a badge that people can wear, something they can put on their resume, like, hey, I served on the OCA TSC from this time to that time, that kind of thing. Does it help if we, and I don't know if anybody has connections, but does it help for like graduate students to be involved, or even undergraduate students, things like that, people who might have more time available to help on these things?
I guess you don't remember being a graduate student.
I know I was driven as a graduate student. I probably took on too much work when I did, but
well, and we can open up
right?
to the wider communities too. It's just our sort of, hey, we assumed we'd get enough volunteers didn't work the first time, but we certainly aren't excluding other people. We're just trying to get a minimum number of people.
Yeah, and one thing that I was going to offer to try and recruit some other people is, you know, I am willing to kind of take, Jason, your call for participants email and kind of distill that down into like a 1-paragraph job description, and really do some active outreach to folks. Like I've got a couple open source organization contacts. I'm not involved in the Linux Foundation or anything like that, but you know, just really do some active outreach, because it seems like the issue is people aren't coming to us. So if we go to them and do some active outreach, hopefully that can get some movement and get some folks to help.
Yeah, I think part of it is an outreach problem. So I think that'd be fantastic. And I mean, we probably could have done a better job in outreach. I'll be honest. Like there's just so many things going on. We did mail it out. We Slacked it, tweeted it, etc. But I think like we didn't actively, repeat the action, right? Over a sustained period of time. So probably could have done more, but yeah,
it almost needs like a, sorry, it almost needs like a marketing push in a sense, right? Like
it is,
right?
Yeah.
Promoted posts or something like that, right? Which doesn't cost that much to do. So
yeah. Okay. So action plan sounds like I will go and make that happen for the maintainers for Kestrel and Stick Shifter. Adam, you'll take that away for Pace, and then
yep.
So Ladrina, maybe you and I can just briefly collaborate that short little blurb, and because I think that description will also help alleviate Adam. That'll help with the concern about what is the work I'm signing up for, right? So I agree that job description and making it crystal clear will be helpful. Yeah, Claudia, maybe we need to communicate more with the job of the TSC. Exactly. I mean, we did. I know in the reach out email, tried to go into that. Maybe I went into too much detail, but I was trying to go into the detail to make it clear that you don't have to do that much. But I don't know. Maybe people didn't read the whole thing or whatever. And you know, maybe as far as your date question, Ladrina, what is our date for the PACE announcement? Is it
Okay,
next
so
week?
everybody on this call, I've certainly heard from you, and Ladrina, I know you're back in the saddle and swamp, but I just pinged you this morning with the draft of the PACE press release. Everybody else has provided a quote. I'm working with you. So that is scheduled for the 7th. And then we've got the end of the year CIS quarterly article at the end of the month, which hopefully, Jason, you'll have a minute to look at today. Ha ha. Tomorrow. Ha ha.
I think if you
It's
could,
fun Monday.
so Dee, I don't know how
So
hard
that-
and fast that December 7th date is, but if you could hold to it, it would be really good because the SBomb run by CISA is on December 15th and 16th. And PACE could be a part of that. And that's a very large forum that, you know, the old one had 150 people. This one might have 1,000. I have no idea. It's going to be a pretty big deal. So if PACE could be real before that meeting, it would be really good.
I think the plan is to hold the date.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think the plan is to hold the date. I know there's a lot of things in motion. I don't think we want to move the date at all.
Right. Yeah.
The only reason I was
That's
asking,
absolutely true.
yeah, the only reason I was asking about the date was because of the junior's question around what is the date that we're trying to get a TSC constituted. And I would say, you know, ideally these would be the same or similar so that when we do the PACE announcement, we have a new TSC. The other wild card here, I'd say, is the website. So we are refreshing the website as well. You know, I don't know, Claudia, what date we have on that. We've got kind of these three things going on at the same time, right? So
we have an ambitious plan just to get at least the first iteration that is publishable done before the holidays. So, yeah. I think we're kind of tweaking mostly and looking for waiting for some feedback and have a call with some folks, marketing folks next week. Yeah, let's see.
So I would tie, so maybe we should put the PACE announcement aside, but I would tie, when we launch the new website, we should have all this TSC stuff sorted. So that on the new website, we can, you know, that is the opportunity to go out and go to the market with a clearer description, more transparency, more openness. Here's our TSC. Here's exactly how you contribute, and make sure that all of that is part of the new website content. So that would say, you know, and if you guys are shooting for the holidays, before the holidays, then that's when we should try to shoot for having a list of TSC members. Folks agree with that? I saw some emojis.
I'm okay with it. I'm a little worried if you really want to do Sbomb Preferred as part of the PACE stuff, that it might be a little bit late, but it's not too bad because I mean, probably a whole lot won't happen between the 16th and the end of the year. It's really a question at the meeting on the 16th, whether we're I don't know if we're going to get to discuss at this meeting, but whether we, the OCA group, think that's a good idea to be part of or not. Because if we don't do it, I think someone's going to.
Do you think these are tied, Duncan? Are you saying that if we don't have the new website and TSC that we can't get involved with the Sbomb?
No, I'm saying that if we get into a competition with OASP or the Linux Foundation or several industry groups on what I would argue is our idea of doing Sbomb Preferred, it's at least if we set it up well enough on the 16th that some people from here attend, and that if we first of all agree we think it's a good idea, we haven't got to discussing it yet. I think it's a good idea. It doesn't mean you all do. That we are at least in position to, once we really start rolling on it, we look like we have our act together. Right now, we don't look like we have our act together. I mean, we all among ourselves know what we're doing. Anybody from the outside looking at it, in my opinion, it doesn't look like we know what we're, I mean, we don't have a TSC.
May I, sorry, Duncan, this is Claudia again. May I ask, what is this mainly about the TSC for like the external, like what does OCA does look like? We're having everything together and we're like know what we're doing.
If you want to do a contribution to one of these projects and you aren't an already insider in one of us already, and you just go to the website and say, and you go to the open projects and you say, well, but you know, who decides? You know, and
yeah.
And again, I'm prejudiced because I still hear it from people, this issue of, no, that's just McAfee and IBM doing something. That's not really a project. So if people go in with that mindset, and then there's nothing that sort of counters it in anything we have, and well, how do they decide whether my PR is going to get accepted or not? I at least personally haven't been able to find that. Again, maybe I just don't know what I'm doing. Are there, you know, if you go into something like, you know, one of the Linux Foundation OS projects, they have, you know, here's the meeting schedule of when you can meet if you want to be in on the prioritization of projects or whatever. There's sort of more visibility into what goes on, and I'm an insider in this and I can't find it.
Yeah, so I think what you're hinting at is, you know, the new website has a much better, you know, we're trying to surface and solve a lot of those problems a lot clearer, and without it could be troublesome is what you're saying.
Right. So, but end of the year versus December 16th, that's not a big deal. Push it too much further, and I think it'd be a big deal. If you get too near to RSA and it's not out, I think you'll get passed by on this executive order stuff.
Yeah, I don't think that, I think well, Claudia just said that they're aggressively trying to meet the end of the year, so I don't think we're going to go out into RSA.
But again, it sounded a little more waterfall to me than agile, so that's why I'm just...
Yeah, I mean, so the only barrier to getting the website out sooner has been cycles, right? It's, you know, Claudia is putting a lot of time into it. Russ is putting a lot of time into it. We also have, you know, Paige from Prophecy, you know, giving some feedback. But
and again, if you make the end of the year, it's not a problem. It's just that, you know, as long as there's a stake in the ground, you're okay. It's just that stake has been moving, so if it keeps moving, it might be an issue. Was my only point.
Yeah. I do not know when RSA is, Claudia. I don't know when it is next year. It's usually in Q1. So
yeah, the dates are fixed. I'm signed up for it.
February. I want to say February 7th. Hold on. I have it.
Yeah, 7th through 10th.
Yeah,
right now.
that's correct.
So so it sounds like we have an action plan. I'm gonna have to check our governance, but from what I recall, we do not need a majority vote or anything like that for the TSC. So I think we have a quorum here that we can just take action on the plan. I'll email the plan out to the list so that everyone knows the plan. But I think we'll be good with logistics wise, because it's at the end of December and we have to be agile. I think we'll actually be good. Duncan, did you want us, you know, so you talked about Sbomb. I don't know how much everyone's aware of what's going on. I don't know if you want to explain what the Sbomb is to folks, and what they're trying to achieve, and what you know this opportunity is potentially for us here around interoperability.
Sure. So for those of you who aren't aware, SBombs software bill of materials, it's something I've been pushing for 8-9 years now. But it's in President Biden's executive order last May that basically told the federal government, hey, get your act together and require this from all your vendors eventually. The sort of short-term activity was the NTIA and NIST came up with some stuff. They've already met those guidelines. It's now being turned over to CISA to implement it, to actually turn it in, to actually be in the FARs and the DFARs, and to basically require all their suppliers to do it. It'll probably take them a while to do it, but the guy who ran it at NTIA, Alan Friedman, has moved over to CISA to run the effort with a larger staff over at CISA, and to actually tell all the agencies what to actually do. So my personal opinion, but recognize I've been pushing this for a long time, so I'm prejudiced in this area, is that SBombs gonna be a really big deal. It's gonna be at least required in critical infrastructure for the U.S. government, and I would argue that's going to then ripple into eventually everything. Recall that NIST, one of the things NIST did define in their critical infrastructure is basically all security software is considered critical infrastructure. So all your companies are eventually going to have to do all this stuff. And STIX has this really neat idea called STIX Preferred, which is, hey, we're not actually going to, make a UL Underwriters laboratory on how to certify this stuff. We're going to write some stuff that you can self-certify your stuff, and other people can tell if you've done it right. And we call it STIX Preferred. So there's this idea of, hey, we could do SBomb Preferred. OASIS, OCA could do SBomb Preferred, probably as part of the PACE project, because PACE basically has SBombs as part of the posture assessment that's being traded among PACEs, or it could be its own thing. We get to decide that. But if we want to get in sort of on the ground floor of this probably tidal wave about to come, now's sort of the time to do it, because in all these meetings that I'm in with all these people doing it, this sort of concept of, oh, should we get Underwriters Laboratory to do it? Oh no, we should get the electrical industry, whatever people to do it, because they're going to do it for the electric utility industry. And the medical people say, no, it should be under the medical thing. So there's 3 different competing formats, all of which are valid and interchangeable, one by NIST, one by OWASP, and one by the Linux Foundation. So probably none of the 3 of them are the right ones to run this sort of common across everything body, because they all have an axe in the game. Probably not the right thing to be run by any one of the industries, because all said and done, all software is interconnected, and the Linux stuff is used in both automotive and healthcare and the electric utility industry, so that it's not going to be any one of those industries really shouldn't set the standards for the other ones. So if there was this concept of SBomb Preferred, and there's this document called a VEX, which is a vulnerability exploitability exchange, which is sort of you saying that no, that bug doesn't really apply to me, or that bug does apply to me, here's how to fix it. Those two electronic documents are going to be a really large part of cybersecurity automation moving forward, and the sort of how you verify that people did it right with this sort of, I'll call it preferred sticker, is an opportunity that we could be in on, or we could just let somebody else do. So I'm saying if we want to be in on it, we can't sit around and wait, because other people are going to do it. But right now, it's still amorphous enough we could take it over if we wanted to. Did that make any sense?
It made sense to me, but I'm pretty well versed in it. So when you say, Duncan, you think maybe it makes sense to be part of PACE, are you saying that like the interoperability, the SBomb and VEX Preferred would be part of the PACE project, PACE working group?
It could be, because one of the postures being exchanged and assessed or collected, whatever the ACE and E are, evaluated, collected, and assessed, maybe, whatever the ACE of PACE is. SBomb is one of the sample examples, and is one, obviously, the DoD crowd that are behind PACE are very interested in, because of all the CISA work and the Biden's executive order.
It's actually
could be its own thing.
It's actually
too.
a really good argument. It's a really good argument that for why the work should come to the OCA, because we have
we got to do it anyway.
that is U.S. government sponsored, that's going to be going and evaluating the SBomb and the VEX, and it needs to be interoperable with everything else.
Yeah,
right?
and the interoperability, because of this weird, there's 3 different formats you can do it with that all have the same information in them, but they are different formats. It's really an interoperability issue, and that's really our forte. So.
Yep. And
Happy
it's definitely
holidays
part
for
of
us.
posture,
Yeah.
right? It's definitely part of posture is software load. So it makes sense to me. I think they're already working on that, though.
By the way,
Oh, they're
Forrest,
they're working
did we
on
lose
posture
Forrest?
assessment of
He's gone.
SBombs. This concept of SBomb preferred, like sticks preferred, would be
Right.
an add-on thing.
Ah, okay.
And that would
Yeah.
get most likely all companies interested in, hey, I want that sticker. You know, I want to be able to say, if I want the government to agree to my SBomb and not second guess me on everything. So I want to have some standard I'm held to that I meet. I want to be part of making that standard, and I would think increase our membership a fair amount. And again, it's probably going to take, I'm going to guess, a year to really get off the ground. But if we wait a year to start, somebody else will have already done it. It's the sort of, we got to be ahead of the wave if we want to do it.
So yeah, so I have the time blocked in my calendar, Duncan, for the SBomb Arama. And I reached out to Alan's staff there to get added to the thing. Haven't heard back yet though.
They are still, weirdly enough, setting up their mailing lists. It's a new, all said and done, Alan moved between, one organization and another, but from a CISA viewpoint, it's an all new thing. So they're getting staffed up, and they're having birthing pains. Not to be surprised, but it is in progress, and it will all come out. And there is some degree of, it's probably going to come out at the last second, but it is. You can get on the list to be informed of, to get invited to it fairly easily just by contacting, like Jason said, Alan's staff, who happens to be named Jason, so it's confusing.
It's not me. Yeah, so I blocked the time in my calendar. I'm gonna try to attend.
I mean, I would argue all of you on the call, if you aren't aware of it, you might want to look into at least attending day one, which is sort of a government introduction. Everybody who doesn't know what we're talking about here. Here's what we're talking about. Here's the work that's been going on the U.S. government's done for the last 3 years. And here's what we're going to do moving forward. And day 2 is going to be, hey, let's all make the plan for moving forward. So even if you don't think it'll impact you, you might want to go to it's noon to 3 Eastern on the 15th and the 16th. You might want to go to at least day 1. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just trust me, you'll probably eventually need to know about it.
Is there a link you should throw around?
There isn't yet. There's a contact a particular person in CISA to get put on a mailing list. They haven't made yet to get told about the meeting.
Well,
there might be a federal register. I'll have to look. There might be a federal register link. He probably had to put it in the federal register, but I don't happen to know what that is.
There's I'll ping you, Matthew. Alan Friedman actually has a LinkedIn post where you can reply to the post to get added.
Oh, that's true. That's a good way to do it, actually.
So I'll ping that over to you. Sorry, Ladrina, I interrupted you there, I think.
Oh, no worries. Jason, you just clarified something that I had gotten mixed up. I was trying to read back in my mind if it was an SBomb specific meeting you were talking about, or the CISA meeting.
Well, the CISA meeting is an SBomb meeting.
Okay.
CISA has now taken over what they call the implementation phase of SBomb. So up until now, it's been, hey, how do we want to do this if we want to do it? Now, Alan, his new job at CISA is chartered with actually the next phase of what was stated in the EO, the CISA phase of now go make all agencies actually do it. That's what he's, and it's part of the vulnerability management section of CISA is the part that he's now in.
I'm posting a link to that in the PGB channel now. Before we so we're already losing people and we're at the top of the hour. So first of all, I think overall, as much as we're talking about governance and whatnot, I think this has been a really positive year for the OCA growth. I think we've got momentum. We had a huge amount of press coverage this year. PACE is only going to add to it. So I'm really excited about next year, and thank you everybody here who's put in so much work to the organization thus far. And yeah, with that, happy holidays to everybody, and we'll chat again in January. And Ladrina, just really quickly too, before we go, the IOB call last week, is fantastic. There's a lot of stuff going on in that group, and actually we got reached out to. I'm building some connections there between some work that's going on in the MITRE Center for Threat Informed Defense and the IOB working group. So interesting things going on there too. Anyway, with that, happy holidays, everybody, and we'll chat soon.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye.